Welcome to the UN Brief. I'm your host, Maya Plintz. Today we interview Sheera Frankel, the New York Times cybersecurity reporter who wrote a book on Facebook explaining everything that's happening behind closed doors, who is in power, who is in charge, and who decides how to address the crisis regarding hate speech on the platform. Thank you very much for watching the UN Brief. Please do not forget to subscribe. You have been covering the Facebook for a long time already, too, before that, right? So before the book project came along.
Right. So Cecilia and I together have been covering Facebook for years. I started covering Facebook around 2015. But Cecilia, I think she's been writing about Facebook for over a decade. And so together we had written several articles about the company, and we just thought that there was so much more to say that was in our notebooks and that we had learned through our reporting for articles that it sort of deserved a book.
Right, and indeed that the crisis too sort of propelled, right? They have been in the news so much in the last 5 years because all the mishaps that have happened, enabled by the platform. And then there was the question that the leadership at the Facebook did not want to admit that they had a role on that, right? So that's one of the aspects that surfaced during your research, right? It seems that
Yes. I
leadership
mean,
wasn't really keen on admitting there were mistakes, things were happening in the platform that they should be paying attention, and they were not.
I think a lot of our research, we sought to get to the heart of who made these decisions and why. And we wanted to know these incredibly important decisions, such as when to alert the public about Russian election interference or how to handle data, people's data on Facebook. We wanted to get to the bottom of who was calling the shots on those decisions. And I think what was interesting for us in our reporting was how often we found that it did go to the top executive of the company, Mark Zuckerberg. And I think, it's very rare to find a company where the chief executive is making this many decisions and where he has consolidated so much power. And, as you get further on in our book and more towards the present day, you see that Mark Zuckerberg is actually controlling more and more of the company and making decisions ranging from what to do about misinformation to hate speech to, really important decisions around the US elections. Those are all being made by one person, Mark Zuckerberg. And so describing who he is and how he came to those decisions seemed incredibly important to us.
So what were some of the challenges of getting people to speak off the record? Most of them spoke, I imagine, but you interviewed around 400 people, right?
Yes. So of the 400 people we interviewed, the vast majority still work at Facebook. And so, these were people who were in violation of their job contracts by speaking to us because Facebook requires its employees to sign an NDA saying they will not speak to journalists. What we found is that we sometimes joked that it felt a little bit like going to a therapy session. We would meet somebody once, twice, three times. By the third time we met, they would have all these things they wanted to tell us that they had seen at the company that bothered them. That they would often start conversations by saying, this just wasn't right. We did the wrong thing. And then they would describe a scene or a scenario to us. And so a lot of them are people who love Facebook and actually expect it to do better. And they wanted to speak to reporters because they wanted it to get out what had happened. They thought it was really important for their own executives to actually heed the lessons of mistakes they had made in the past and that they felt the company was trying to brush under the rug. One of them said to me, this was about 2 weeks before the book was published. One of my sources said to me, well, I hope my boss reads this in a book because he didn't listen to me when I brought it up with him in meetings.
Indeed, and there were also some employers that left the company precisely because they weren't being heard. A bit about the relationship with Cheryl and Mark, because I believe Cecilia has interviewed them, and you as well, right? You have been able to speak with them during the process of writing the book or before?
So no, I mean, Cecilia and I have spoken to Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg as reporters, but they declined to be interviewed for the book. And we note in our author's note that Mark Zuckerberg was not interested in participating in a book, and Sheryl Sandberg met with us several times off record. But they're very, very used to controlling their messaging and their PR, and they're very, very careful about how the world sees them. And so we were told that they would consider participating if we agreed to certain conditions, such as their quotes being approved ahead of time by them, or being able to see a copy of the book early. And as journalists, that's just not something we do. We never allow that sort of thing. I think that's widely considered sort of basic journalistic practice, where you cannot show people a copy of your article before it's published, or send quotes for approval. Right. We would never allow anyone to revise it. And so I think that when we made it clear that, this was not going to be a book in which they had oversight, or they had the ability to, to do to have some of the control that they're used to having, they were not interested in participating. But I will say that it didn't, I don't know that it affected, I mean, it would have been nice to ask Mark and Sheryl some of the questions that came up in the course of our reporting, but there were so many people in those meetings, involved in those meetings, that were willing to talk to us, that we didn't actually find it to be that much of an issue for us in putting together this book.
Yeah, because in the end, it seems like your idea is not just to make an expose, but also to sort of bring to the fore the issues in the hopes that the leadership will pay attention to these issues. At least that's what I got from watching one of your interviews. I think was with Katie Couric, where Cecilia precisely says something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, and we've already heard from many executives at Facebook who have read our book and who have thanked us for writing our book.
Right. Did you hear anything from Mark and Sheryl? Any comments, or they have?
No, we did not hear from Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg, but we did hear from other executives at the company.
Did they treat it as a crisis sort of communications because so much, backstories are coming to the fore, or?
They were definitely concerned about it. They assigned, they basically created a team within the company who responded to the book, and who responded to press requests, and who crafted statements trying to, to disparage the book, which we expected of them, because that is what they've done in other, cases of other books, or other articles that they haven't liked being published. We expected that to happen, and so it didn't affect us much. And I would just note that, they made comments like, oh, well, there have been 367 books written about Facebook, and this is just another one. And when they said that, one of their own employees wrote on their internal message boards, well, that's misinformation. There haven't been 367 books written about Facebook. Why would we say that publicly in the press? So, yeah, I mean, I think one of their own employees looked at that sort of PR spin that they were trying to do and laughed about it.
Yeah, and you covered mostly all issues that arose regarding foreign interference in the U.S. elections. You didn't touch upon much of other issues that happened abroad. What is it called? The users base is mostly outside of the US, the majority, right, of this 2 billion.
We touch quite a bit on their expansion abroad. We have an entire chapter dedicated to Myanmar and what happened there, and the problems that led to hate speech growing out of control in Myanmar. And we touch upon, Facebook's role in many other countries. I think, you could argue that there could be a book written in almost every country about Facebook's role there. And so we did try to tie in what was happening in other countries to what the decisions the leadership was making in Menlo Park.
And one last thing, I remember you mentioned also that the question also of not having enough resources. I think it was Amos, who he used to work with Facebook security team, that the security team at one point was just 6 people, and then they have 1.5 billion users, and how possibly resources and investment made towards trying to improve the platform and rid it of hate speech and other harmful content has not received enough resources.
Yes, I mean, well, so I'll say two. So, firstly, the 6 people that Facebook had on it at one point on its threat intelligence team was just, it's a very specific team that looks at foreign governments and disinformation. So that's separate from the overall security team, which is hundreds of people and now even larger. But yes, I mean, I think the question of how to safeguard the platform is one that no company, including Facebook, has figured out. They've hired content moderators, thousands of content moderators all over the world. They're using AI, but they know from their own statistics that the AI can only catch so much. And especially when it comes to other languages, not non-English languages and non-Latin languages, hate speech is very, very difficult to find. It is very country specific and culture specific. And so they're still grappling with what to do. And I think because they've grown so large so quickly, it's an incredibly difficult problem.